Hi, friends. Welcome to Becoming Unbound, the podcast where we explore what it means to live a life unbound. I'm your host, Carly Butler, and every week we'll be diving into stories, conversations about what it means to break free from societal norms, discovering your true purpose, and creating a life that feels truly free. Whether it's personal freedom, professional growth, spiritual awakening, or financial independence, this podcast is all about helping you embrace the messy, raw, and beautiful journey of becoming unbound. Now, becoming unbound means stepping into the unknown, letting go of the limitations that hold us back, and creating a life that's authentically ours. It's a journey of courage, resilience, and transformation, and I am so honored to share it with you. Today, we'll be joined by Susan Baker, who is a passionate speaker, writer, and advocate, and a recently published author of the book A Life Beyond Words, and the author of the infamous blog, Live, Love, and Autism. I am so excited for you to hear her story and insights about finding out what it means to find freedom through the art of surrender. So let's dive in. Welcome, Susan. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks, Carly. So fun to be here.
I'm so honored that you are here. We've had such a beautiful sort of like how we met and our sort of story of coming together. I feel so honored to know you and your family. And let's sort of start off with like, how did we meet? Let's tell that story a little bit about how we came to know one another, because for me, it's quite special.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, speaking of, living unbound and freedom and stepping outside of, I think, what our comfort zones are, right? So if we bring ourselves back to a couple years ago, the year would have been 2021, I believe. And we were all internationally experiencing a way of living that was unusual and never before, right? With depending on the country you were in, with lockdowns and social distancing and safety measures in place in workplaces and schools that may or may not have aligned with or felt resonant with, I think, ourselves or our family units. And that's what brought me to you, because our family, at the beginning of, when the more significant lockdowns were happening and schools were really being affected by the strict safety measures, we really looked at our children, my Andrew and Abby, and we agreed as a family that we would give ourselves permission to think outside the box on schooling. And so it would have been Abby's grade 4 year that we decided to actually pull her out of the public school system and do things differently. And what that looked like was we agreed with another family to co-host a learning pod or, a small learning group at home. So alternating between our two houses with a group of 4 grade 4 students. We figured, what if we got to lose? We had time flexibility for us to be able to host. We had some financial freedom and ability to do that. And Abby was grade 4. So really wasn't much at stake. We thought this was a great year for us to hire a teacher and bring the learning into our home where the children would have more freedom in terms of maybe what life could look like in a more typical way outside of lockdowns and safety measures and things like that. So we hired you, and here you are. We were so thrilled. I remember when we interviewed you, when we first met you, it was unanimous among the families that it was just such a great initial connection to you. And we knew you were highly qualified and passionate and like-minded and learning oriented, and in such an intuitive and practical way for the kids. And it was really one of Abby's best schooling years to date. She's now grade 7, Carly. And and we often reflect back on that year. I mean, most families reflect back on those years, which were so atypical for our children. And we know it was actually damaging for a lot of the kids. But we look at that year and think, wow, that was a really courageous step we took. We not only were thinking outside the box, we were living outside the box and created this really unique, special opportunity for Abby and that group of kids. And it was unlike anything else. So yeah, that's how we know you.
Yeah, it was a transformative year. Like, I feel like both of us took this huge leap of faith into the unknown, knowing that, and I often reflect on this time that like we had really been in touch with what our values were in that. And I think that's a really common practice. It's come up in a lot of the conversations on the podcast of getting clear about what those values were for your family. And for me, it was being able to continue to teach. I tried the online thing and then it didn't work. So this opportunity presented itself to do alternative education. And it was like very alternative at the time. We ended up being in your wonderful basement. I have very fond memories of your basement. And it was just a really beautiful year where we experienced such freedom. And oh my gosh, we spent so much time outside. And yeah, we had co-created a curriculum with the company that kind of brought us together. And that was truly like such an amazing time. Like, I finally found that I was also dipping my toe into like what it was to be a teacher. I know they still called me Miss Butler, but it was almost more of a mentor guide kind of space where it wasn't so, like I'm the teacher at the front of the classroom. So then once I broke into that, it was this, and the way I was able to get to know Abby and that was really like the beginning of the eye-opening, like, oh yeah, things in life can be done differently. And I'm sure that was the same way for your family as well. Like another big step for you into understanding that life doesn't have to look like these little boxes that's been laid out for us.
Yes, absolutely. And even that entrepreneurial piece that you could play with that with the children, and Abby is back in the regular school system, but with this really empowered sense of self. And, she created this business, Abby's Joy, out of your, learning opportunity at our house. So, there was just so much opportunity and opportunity for growth for Abby and learning and all of that. And it came out of that place of, what are we doing? How do we do this? Do we know what we're doing? And having that trust and faith that this felt good and we would all figure it out. And it was excellent.
Yeah, especially in a time where a lot of people were experiencing the opposite, and whatever reflections you have on that time, like for us, it was this transformative, empowering time where we were like, no, we took all of what was going on. We brought the power back into our own hands. We made decisions for ourselves that worked out. And now I reflect back on it. I was like, that was one of the best decisions I had ever made. And it's like, and then I feel like I tried to go back into like a more structured teaching set place. And I was like, oh, this isn't as personal as I thought it would be. Like, I mean, I was in your basements. Like, it was just this next level. And I remember, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but in Vietnamese, there's the second word for teacher is actually like second mom. And I spent lots of time in Vietnam. And so I always it was such a beautiful thing to experience that of like becoming I was like almost, I don't know, this guide mentor kind of experience aside. And it was alternative to what I was so used to after 8 years of teaching.
Yeah.
Really beautiful, beautiful experience.
It was, definitely.
So Susan, you've had quite a journey through you just published a beautiful book. I can say that like I've cried multiple times, and I don't know if it's just because I have such a connection to you and your family, and I can see some of the moments and I'm sure your friends and family and the people who know you and the people who follow the blog. It was such a close place to my heart. And so whether it was happy tears or like whoa tears, it was so beautiful. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey and how the book came to be, and maybe, I mean, I feel like we can have such a long conversation about this, but give us kind of the Coles Notes on your beautiful journey to where you are today.
Yes. And thank you for that feedback on the book. And what I love hearing about people who have read the book is, definitely for people who know our family and know our story, even parts of it, it has meant so much to them because it's from start to finish that whole story, and it's very touching. But I love hearing from people who have no idea who we are and don't know our story and find themselves in it in some way. It's very relatable, right? And so, yes, it's a story of our family, which includes an autism diagnosis, the loss of an infant, and then the joy that comes with the birth of another child, which is Abby, and all of the different layers around what that looked like for our family. It is relatable because it's the journey of a mother. It's the journey of a family. It's a story of love and resilience and hardship and loss and grief and challenge and triumph and perseverance, right? And the joy that can come out of the dark. And so it makes me feel, it gives me goosebumps, to be honest, when I hear from others that's what it meant to them as well. Because we're never alone in our journeys. Our journeys may look different, but we're never alone. And I have felt personally that through being in that vulnerable space of sharing through the blog and through the book, that it validates my experience, but it also makes me feel less alone and helps validate the experience of others. So, that's what all of our personal transformation journeys do when we share. So here we are together chatting about this. And one of the pieces I think that links really beautifully with the start of our conversation is regarding my son, Andrew. Abby's brother is Andrew. Andrew is 16. He is non-speaking, autistic, and he is who has directed the really transformative growth for our family. I mean, not just thinking outside the box, but really having to take action and live outside the box. And even from the framework of schooling, we advocated really hard when Andrew was first diagnosed with autism to have him included as much as possible in mainstream schooling, that it would not only benefit Andrew, who's capable of learning, but it would benefit all of the children, because that's what an inclusive society looks like in real life, right? And if we don't give our children these opportunities to be with people who may look and sound and act different from us, how do we build that tolerance as adults, as a community, and as a society? So we always advocated for that for our children, for Andrew. There came a point, however, where Andrew's needs became very high. He's non-speaking, and we really didn't know how to support him with accessing learning in a typical school environment. And so we always had to do kind of like a hybrid approach. So part-time at regular school with, quote, regular kids, the typical population, and then part-time at a supported therapy center, for example. At one point, it became very difficult. Andrew was probably 8 years old, and we had we were doing all sorts of different things, different therapies and different schooling and centers. My back history is I'm a holistic nutritionist by training. And so I did a lot of holistic therapies with Andrew as well. So from everything from, good nutrition and diet to supplements, different forms of cleansing and detoxification, sort of with this assumption that he's my child. He's the child of a holistic health practitioner who believes that when you support the body, you can bring health and healing to the whole person. And I think I was really still stuck on my child should look different than he is. My autistic child should be the one you hear about who recovers, quote unquote, from autism, right? That's a term that's used in the autism community, based on this idea that we're supposed to fix our kids. And I use those terms very gently because they are very charged for a lot of us as parents, because you get to a point where all you want to do is to love and accept your child as they are. And for me, that moment came out of a very difficult, dark conversation with my husband in a time where it was really hard with Andrew. He was having so much trouble expressing his needs and his wants. And, he was throwing the soil from plants in our house. And at one point after dinner, he threw a glass full with water and it shattered across the kitchen. And my husband and I were arguing. And, we say to each other, we said in that moment, what are we doing? What do we need to do to help this child? Nothing's working. And for me, it was this really difficult place of, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do next. I don't know how to support this child. Nothing I'm doing, which I think should be, quote, working to really support this child, isn't in the way I thought it should. And so I had this real dark moment where I was crying, and I went to bed that night and I thought, I've got nothing. I've got nothing to go on. I've got no ideas. This doesn't feel good. I want to love my child. I don't want to feel like I have to fix him. And yet I don't know where to go from here. And it was a moment that I realize now was my first true forced experience with having to surrender. And there, in the end, is so much freedom that comes out of that place. Because the minute we let go of that grip of what we're holding on to so tightly, what we think life should look like, the minute we can let go of that even for a bit, it allows life to show us what's possible. And it was in the days and weeks and months after that really dark place where I thought, I got nothing. I think all these things that we're doing are helping, and yet it doesn't look like what I think it should. And when I started to let go of that, the possibilities opened up. And what was presented to us, something I was not even looking for, I didn't even know existed, was a method of communication that changed everything for our family. And you know this part of the story. I mean, this is where our family's life just took a beautiful left turn. And we've learned so much about not just Andrew, but about how we thought we had it, figured out, or we thought we knew what we were supposed to do. But only when I surrendered did life present a new way of communicating with our child. And so it was another family who shared about this letterboard method of communication, it's very simple, but there is a lot of training involved in order to communicate using an A to Z letterboard for Andrew with us. And we learn not just that he is cognitively capable and very bright, but we started to learn who he was as a person. And it is a beautiful story because it's not just what he says and what he writes, and some of that, and I'll share some of that. It's that he's able to do it, right? The letterboard and this piece of our story, for me, represents what it looks like when we entertain living outside the box, right? When we entertain what life could be, what's possible for us if we think and live outside the box, right? That whole piece around freedom. And so, yes, for me, freedom came through surrender. And I love that. You could never plan that. I would never have predicted that or even asked for it. But it was only because of that experience of surrender that our family found freedom and this beautiful understanding of who our non-speaking autistic child truly is.
I have goosebumps all over my body. It's incredible what is possible when you choose to let go of that grip. And someone once described it to me as, if you're walking around with your fists all fisted up, and then like if you look at your fist, like what on earth can land on that? Not a bird, not a butterfly, not anything. There's no light in the middle of that. It is dark and tense. But what happens when you start to let go and open up your palm and open that up? Now look at the space that you've created, the amount of things that could land on there for you, and the light that can get through your fingers, and like all of those things. And yeah, when you're gripping on and trying and working, and it sounds like from your holistic background, like you tried everything. And it was like the moment you stopped trying, all of a sudden it was like, I mean, not that you ever stopped trying to love and accept and understand more. All of a sudden you just had to like, okay, well, this isn't working. Why don't I do less? And then boom, you have this like open palm where something could land in, and you provided that space. It's so beautiful. And I think you were already looking outside the box, right, Susan? Like you were already, thinking different methodologies and ways that you could help soothe and help understand your son and all these kinds of things. And you had, you were already kind of equipped for that.
Mm-hmm.
There was that last piece of just being like, okay, well, what haven't I tried? Well, I haven't tried doing nothing.
That's it. Yeah. Because that's just it. I didn't then let go of all those other things we were doing, right? Like all the, the nutrition and the supplements and the movement therapy and the time outside in nature. None of that went away. All of that was important. I still believe all of that, brought Andrew to the place and the person that he is, for sure. And I still recommend that to families. That's what holistic means, really, is like looking at that whole picture for each of us. But exactly that, the missing piece, and it was literally the piece within myself, was, okay, Susan, you've got this, but you're missing one thing, which is that you don't have to control all of this. You need to lessen the grip, because life is going to show you things that you don't know about, but only if you can lighten up, right? So yeah, it's like a subtlety. It's like a nuance, really, because, it was partly letting go as well of fixing my child and thinking like, oh, autism is this thing that needs to be solved. There's so much we don't know about the autistic mind and the autistic person. And there's so much we don't know about a lot of things, right? And so it was almost like an ego check and a humbling to realize I don't need to have it all figured out, right? Can I be open enough to not having it all figured out? Can I be open enough to learning things in a different way and being shown a different way? And that's really where that freedom came from, was, okay, just like lighten up the grip a little bit, as you say, allow yourself to receive. And that's what happened.
That's incredible. And I think it's so, like when I met you with the letter board. And so what I think is so fascinating is that this lesson that you felt you like needed to learn, through like, it feels like Andrew had been trying to tell you that for a long time, like without words, but with like in this sense of like listening and stillness, and you had discovered so long ago that being in nature was what was best, and how he was grounding, and what that did for your family and all the activities that you guys were able to do. And I feel like that be still, do less, quiet your mind, quiet your body. Like there's a quote, something about like being still and listening and just like doing less, and then figuring out that in that silence, in that lack of words, that's where there's magic. Like we try to explain our way out of all these things, and it's the human condition just to like put words onto situations, or like I feel, unfree, or I feel shackled. I think about the words that I've put onto my own life, and it's like, well, do we really need that? Or can we just like have an understanding of it, understanding it is what it is, and then just do less with it?
Yeah. Andrew writes, everything is to surrender, because everything else is just struggle, right? But he wrote that in the last couple of years. So I didn't have that message from him when he was little, right? When he was little, I mean, listen, it's not an easy path. Having a child with an autism diagnosis is a very, very difficult path. It looks different for everybody, but I will never take that away from us or any other family. And so, of course, you're busy trying to figure it all out. And you all also feel like you've got this race against time. But certainly in the years after learning how to surrender, I had to revisit surrender again and again. And yes, Andrew was part of reminding me of that. And he would do that through his words, or he would do that through his presence. So in moments where I was all, worked up about something, I could tell that he was playing off of that. And so I needed to come down in order for him to come down. So yeah, there was always that interplay. He is a very wise child, as are most of our children are here to teach us things, right? And sometimes we get it, and sometimes it takes a really dark place or being hit over the head until we really learn that. It's an ongoing journey for sure. I love to look at our story because people will say, well, how do you do that? Like, how do you just surrender? Or how do you allow life to present itself? And there's three things I think of, and it kind of came through me when I was writing the book. And the first is, I think if we can recognize that we are the experts on ourselves, right? We are the experts on our own life, on our children. There is no one else that knows us better than we know ourselves. And so if we can really own that and listen to that, then that helps to steer the direction that we need to go. And the second piece of that, though, is that we then are required to take action. And that's empowering. It takes courage, but it's also empowering, which is to say, okay, if I'm the expert, then I need to be courageous and take that next step. That no one is here to save us, right? That the power, we don't need to wait for the experts or the systems or the government or whatever it is, right? That we are the ones that need to take action on that life. And that takes practice, takes a lot of courage and takes practice. And then the third part of that is that, in fact, what it takes is to keep showing up to our life. And that became my mantra, Carly. That was what got me through some of the really dark days, was it telling myself to keep showing up. And what does that look like? Well, in the mornings, it looks like getting out of bed. And, that's kind of a joke we make, like, oh, well, at least you got out of bed. But for some of us in some of really dark days, that actually takes a lot, right? So showing up to our life is how we begin to surrender to that life and allow life to present itself. We keep showing up, right? Day after day. And that's when the beauty of life unfolds.
Yeah. And throughout the book, when I'm reading, like, there was many moments where you were like, all right, I can't.
Yeah.
Done. I don't know what to do. Hands are up. Like, I'm lost, or I'm whatever it is. And the next day comes and you show up again at the next situation and the next learning. And I think in every single moment, and there can be a lot of those times where you're like, oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know where I'm at. I'm getting all these different things coming in from, like, all these different, whether it's people or understandings of the world and these situations. But then you can be like, no, actually, like, the next day you wake up, the sun shines, and you can do it.
Mm.
And in those moments of, like, I've had enough, right after that, and it seemed like in the book, it was always like right after that, there was something beautiful on the other side for you. So, and I think in this process of becoming unbound or discovering freedom or whatever it is these moments where you are brought down to your knees and you have no idea where to turn. And then the next day comes and you show up, and that's it. And you get out of bed. You're like, yesterday was awful and I'm in this dark place, but I'm going to keep being here. And then eventually through that darkness, the things starting to lighten up, and then this beautiful light can come in and you're like, oh, there's my next step, or there's that next realization. And that's what makes our human experience so powerful and, like, full of life. And there is that polarity of, like, the darkness and the light, and there cannot be one without the other. And I think that's, you only know love and bliss because you've known suffering and hardship. And I feel like the book is such a beautiful demonstration of that. And I found a lot of that. That was one of the pieces that I connected really well to in the book.
Yeah, it's so true. I love that. I mean, and it almost sounds cliche, but I think all of us have that in our life. It looks different. I keep saying that, but we all go through the dark. And I think that is when it allows us to really appreciate the light when it's in our life. I'm going to read something from the book, Carly. It's one of Andrew's quotes, which are, trickled through the book. He writes, "We need to remember that we are powerful. We hold the ability to create a beautiful world." It's just what you were saying. It's a great summary of that. And, we've hardly talked about what is this method? What is this letterboard tool? So I'm hoping that for your listeners, they'll reach out, and we'll put some information maybe in the show notes on how to connect to this method of communication for your child, because it's certainly not as easy as dropping an alphabet in front of them and expecting that they can spell out these deep insights, right? But what I'd love to leave families with is this notion that your non-speaking autistic child is in there and actually likely has an interest in wanting to communicate beyond the pictures and the word symbols that we have set up for them on the iPads that they use, and other methods of picture word communication, which my son Andrew still does use. So the letterboard is now sort of a deeper opportunity for Andrew to really share who he is. And it's incredible because we just didn't expect it, right? We never sat with him and read extensively to him, because we really didn't know that he was in there to the extent that he was. And, we feel some shame and guilt around that a little bit, but I think that's why I wrote the book, Carly, because it's so empowering for families to know that all they have to do, step one, is to presume competence in their child, that there is someone there, even though it might look like their child is in another world. So again, it's giving ourselves, our children, ourselves as parents, this opportunity to think outside of what the norm is telling us, what the experts are telling us. There's freedom in that if we can courageously look outside of that, right?
Yeah, it's not the end of the road when someone says, well, that's all we can do. It's like, well, okay, that's all you can think of that I can do. And here I go on to my own journey, and I'm going to start like paving the way for my own family, or your whatever it is for your kids, to really discover that there could be something else out there that is something you didn't even know that you had to surrender, and then it just kind of flows to you. And we talk a lot on this podcast about those leaps of faith and about stepping into the darkness and just having this faith that you're like, okay, there's going to be something on the other side of this. And one thing that and I knew you were surprised as well to understand not only that there was consciousness and competence within Andrew, but then to find out that there's wisdom from what sounds like spiritual sages. I remember and I don't remember the words that Andrew said to me. It was one of the last kind of days of the pod. We were kind of winding down. It was summer, and he said something so profound to me, and I wish I wrote it down. The words were, it was just something about having faith within myself, and that I had everything that I needed. And it kind of knocked me back just to be like, wow, this is wisdom that I would pay thousands of dollars for a spiritual guru to come and do some reading for me. You know what I mean? And then understand that there is this wisdom and this almost this connection to whatever it is, source, God, universe, the divine, whatever it is. That was what I walked away understanding from Andrew, was that there was something way greater than that. And that was always, for me, as a teacher, I had many opportunities to be in these more high needs classrooms and to sort of be interacting with students like that. And I'd always felt this draw to those classrooms. If I ever got a substitute position or whatever role, they were like, oh, you're in the classroom, the special education or the needs classroom. I forget, they call it something different now. And I was always like, yes, I love hanging out with these guys, because there are these little bits of wisdom, and whether there is speaking or there isn't, there's just this. And you say it a lot in your book that there is this connection that you experience with Andrew. And I think that goes for many neurodivergent thinkers and those in the world that maybe it looks like we don't understand them, but there's there's something there, and assuming competence in those individuals is such a beautiful gift, like such a beautiful way of thinking in life. And like, that's the baseline for all of us. And
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think with the, a neurodiverse population or a population of people, including anywhere in our communities, that kind of force us to look and think differently, right? And well, Andrew, anyway, in our family has really pushed us to look at what our priorities are, what our values are, how we spend our time. And when he writes the things he writes, I mean, listen, and he can also be coy and funny and, a bit sassy or whatever. So, right. But he also does write such incredible wisdom. But when we say to him, well, what the heck? Where does that come from? And he looks at us like, it's what everybody should know. And he'll write that. He'll say, it resonates so much with you because this is universal truth. These are, I'm not saying anything, like, these are things we all know to be true, but you are all so busy in your lives that you forget or you don't listen. And so Andrew writes things we all know to be true. But I think coming from him, it kind of wakes us up sometimes to say like, oh yeah, right. Thank you for that reminder. Right. So, and I remember that, Dave, when he wrote that out, and I can't remember exactly what he told you, but I was like, oh, wow, man, that drives it home. And he is succinct with his words, Carly. I mean, it takes a lot of effort for Andrew to write on the letterboard, right? Think of all the words we've just used in this podcast, right? And he doesn't have that same opportunity. So his words are chosen. They are deliberate. And that's what drives his messages home for sure.
yeah, I heard this once that like to be economical with your words is actually one of the most powerful skills that you can have as a speaker or a writer, just to be able to get your point across in so little words so that there isn't this like mashed up, messy sentences or whatever it is, so that you can really deliver the point in an economical way with the language that we are gifted. And I think it can make such an impact on our, whether we're chatting with a friend or teaching a class or having a public speaking event. Like, that is so necessary. And I think that's a beautiful skill that Andrew like models for everyone.
Yeah. Agree.
So Susan, as we're sort of getting closer to the end of our session today and our conversation, this has been so beautiful. If there was something that you could say to your younger self or someone who's feeling they're like, oh yeah, there's something on the other side of this. Maybe they are in the dark. Maybe they're at a point where they're like, I feel like I've checked everything out that the experts say, and I've checked all the boxes, but I just have this inner knowing that there's another way to do something, or maybe it's not even an understanding yet. What would you say to like someone like that, or maybe a version of your younger self that before you decided to surrender? What advice would you give them?
That's such a beautiful question. And I would say, can you have the courage to remain open? Right? Because it's not necessarily about specific answers. And we often think, well, we've done everything and we've looked at everything. And that may be true, but maybe there's more coming. And so can you have the courage, not just to keep showing up in your life, but to remain open to the possibility that there's something else?
Yeah, to be open to whatever. And it's not probably, I mean, it might look like exactly what you thought it would be, but it probably won't. It probably is going to look like some deeper lesson that when you reflect back on it, you think, wow, I could have never like imagined that situation would have turned out the way I thought it would be. I think there's something about like, you just worry about the feeling and like you let God or the universe sort of take over how it's going to look. You just kind of have to know that like, this is what I'm searching for. This is what I'm open to. The how just kind of like the universe will fill in those dots for you.
Yeah. Yes, I know. Yeah. And that sounds so much easier said than done, doesn't it? So, and that's just it. I mean, if you can be gentle with yourself to say on a daily basis, just stay open. Stay open. It may be a person, a job, a book, a tool, I don't know, guy at the bus stop. Like, we don't know what life is going to present to us. Can we remain open? And whatever that looks like, however you have to do that for yourself, right? Whether that's you journal every morning, or you read a book that encourages you to stay open, or you have a friend that, encourages you. But the more you practice letting go of that grip on your life, the more you practice being open, the easier it gets. And then probably, maybe, the easier it gets for the universe or God, your higher self, to reveal itself to you. Easier said than done, but absolutely possible. Absolutely possible. I mean, that's my story, right? And it's an incredible experience when you look in hindsight at how being open completely shifts your life. It's awesome.
It's amazing. But it does take that reflection, and it does take those challenges and those moments where you are just about ready to give up, that like those, it isn't without those challenges. And I think if we can always just remember and think back, and understand that when we are presented with these challenges, you can sort of be like, ooh, this is hard. This is a challenge. And if you can like be conscious of that, then you're like, but every other challenge in my life has led to something beautiful. So I'm going to muddle through this and be in the mud and keep showing up in the mud, and then be like, and just have that awareness that like, I don't know what's on the other side, but like, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Susan, thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing. Where can people find you? I'm going to put everything in the show notes, but where can people find you if they want to know more about your story, more of your writing?
For the day-to-day, everyday life stuff, come and follow us on Instagram at Life with Susan, or on Facebook. The blog is Life, Love, and Autism. And then beyond that, I would grab a copy of A Life Beyond Words, because that is available anywhere online. And it's not just a beautiful story, but it also, I think, really encourages people to model that concept of being open and to keep showing up. And yeah, please be in touch. That would be awesome.
Yeah, amazing. And I know you've got so many people. Like, I always watch the connections that people make with you, and you share so much of that on socials and whatnot. So it's so beautiful to understand that your story has such an impact on people, and whether you can, like, whatever it is that you relate to within that story, it's a beautiful opportunity to not feel so alone in a world that sometimes feels like we don't know the answers and we don't know what's coming next. And to see what your story has led to, and how you're sort of sharing that now, it's so beautiful. So thank you so much for your time, Susan.
Oh, you're welcome.
This has been great. And I feel like I'll have to get you back on the podcast. I feel like we could talk so much more about all the lessons and the things, but maybe until your next book.
Right. Oh my gosh. No pressure, but I'm open.
You are open. Amazing.
Anyway, thanks for the chat, Carly.
Amazing. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and keep living that unbound life. We're here to find freedom through surrender. Amazing.